The title of this session is Developing ATM Services in Troubled Economic Times. And make no mistake, in spite of a few green shoots of recovery, these do remain very troubled economic times. Over the whole of 2009, GDP in the OECD area fell by 3.4%, the first decline since their records began in 1960. It's true that the last quarter showed some signs of recovery, but it can best be described, I think, as weak, uncertain. Some key economies, Dieter, you'll know this, such as Germany and Japan, fell by even more over the whole of last year. And the impact on aviation is, of course, very severe. IATA report passenger traffic down by 3.5% compared with 2008, a year which in itself was a year hit by recession. And although airlines are cutting back on the numbers of flights they operate, demand has fallen even faster.
That's our communication people. Yeah,
the financial consequences of this slump would be tough
clear
for a healthy industry. The airline industry, on the other hand, has now lost an average, and I sometimes have to pause when I read this statistic, it's lost an average of $5 billion a year over the past decade. Now, as a result, we've seen some airlines go out of business, we've seen mergers, but we've also seen, driven by losses of this kind, the airline community looking hard at all their costs, doing what they can to minimize them, including the cost of air traffic management. And that cost of air traffic management is now, of course, spread over fewer flights. In the classic European model, this means that there is pressure to increase route charges per flight in order to maintain overall revenue, which in turn makes the problem even harder for our airline colleagues. And we can no longer assume that airlines will pick up the tab for this cost without challenging it, and we know that they don't. And indeed, it's only right that they should hold us to account. So what can we, in the air traffic management industry, do to help? And what particular difficulties do we face? I think you've heard Dieter say exactly what I'm about to say. ATM is essentially an infrastructure business. That means that we have a fundamental challenge, a challenge to balance short-term needs with long-term needs. Short-term, we need to tweak the existing system to see where we can reduce costs at today's level of demand, doing better with what we already have. And reducing costs isn't just about savings inside our companies. We can also save money for the airlines by reducing their fuel burn, by making the routes their aircraft fly between airports more direct. Another example is continuous descent operations where the aircraft stays higher for longer. And in a way, these savings are even better than saving money inside our companies because they also have a real environmental benefit. Continuous descent operations can save up to 150 kilos of fuel per flight, or if you like, 500 tons of CO2. Now that's worth having, and they also reduce noise impact. But whether we're looking to save money internally or improve efficiency, we must not just focus on the short term. We need to make sure that we're also looking at the longer term, that we're developing an efficient, a safe system for future levels of traffic. A clear example is training new controllers. We have to look forward to see how many we're going to need 2, 3, 5 years from now. Cutting back too hard on training now, because times are tough, will cause real problems in the future. So, although we have to adapt our plans in order to reflect our revised forecasts, our basic requirement, the requirement to invest in the future, remains. Indeed, with the pressure to become more efficient while still coping with growth, there's a real need for programs such as CESAR and NextGen and others in other parts of the world. More than ever, it's clear also that we cannot prepare for the future in isolation. For example, new technology must be coordinated. You can't expect a single aircraft to carry different boxes of electronics for each jurisdiction, for each continent. But more than that, we need to come together in order to become more efficient, to take advantage of the economies of scale that are available to us. Small ATM operations cannot be as cost-effective as large ones. You just need to compare the position in Europe with that in the US to see that that's the case. Now, in Europe, we're moving to something called functional airspace blocks to try and gain those economies of scale. But that's just one example. I was in Dubai in January, and we witnessed the Middle East Declaration, optimizing Middle Eastern airspace. I certainly welcome that initiative. I've also noticed with interest the recent calls for, I think it's called a seamless Asian sky, most noticeably the Kansai statement at a conference in Japan last year. There's already excellent cooperation in that region on projects such as Aspire, the Asia and South Pacific Initiative to reduce emissions. And the key message here is that we need to come together, and we need to come together at all levels to make things happen in order to balance the short-term and the long-term pressures that I described. Now, of course, that's much easier said than done. And a particular challenge is the wide diversity of organizations that need to come together. We have a wide range of business models. We have ANSPs, essentially still natural monopolies. We have an airline industry subject to huge competitive pressures. And airports are different again, and indeed vary significantly amongst themselves. Then we have the regulators, governments, and even an intergovernmental organization such as EUROCONTROL. Now, in Europe, we've added into this picture the European Commission, who we heard from earlier, the CESAR joint undertaking, a public-private partnership, and functional airspace blocks. And what we need to do, I think, is to find a new model of cooperation, a new model of working together, one which takes account of the different economic models of all the different players. The first gain in that is greater understanding of the issues affecting the other partners. That comes from open dialogue, from sharing information, from working together to plan for the future. And the effectiveness of this approach can be seen in the success of initiatives such as collaborative decision-making, which we have at many airports in many different parts of the world. We've seen real gains in efficiency being made simply through each of the players getting to really understand the position of the others, what issues affect their other partners. We need to find a way of taking that approach and working out how we develop it across the whole of air traffic management. In Europe, I think the CESAR joint undertaking is certainly one example of how we can make this new collaborative approach work. We've also heard mentioned today, if I may be European-centric for a moment, about the European-wide performance regime, which is part of the single European sky. The intention for that is for an implementing rule to be adopted this year, which will include criteria for national supervisory authorities to create performance plans by the end of 2011. And they will cover the following 3 years, so up to 2014. With hard targets, with incentives. Now, some of these incentives will be financial, and they may result in compensation for airspace users when targets are not met. This is, if you like, an early form of economic regulation, and it will take time to mature. Indeed, the experience from other industries is that economic regulation is something more of an art than of a science. You can't always predict how organizations will modify their behavior. But I do believe that the performance regime could be really valuable in helping to encourage organizations to take a wider view and to encourage on improving the performance of the system as a whole. In conclusion, it's clear that the recession that we're facing is creating huge challenges. We are all, including in EUROCONTROL, critically examining our own organizations in order to find savings. But we cannot ignore the future. I'm slightly embarrassed to recall that our doctors tell us that in order to lose weight and keep it off, exercise is just as important as diet. We need to become fitter as well as leaner. We in ATM also need to achieve this balance between reducing costs now and making sure that we can meet the capacity needs of the future while becoming even more efficient in that future. My overall message is that in order to do that, we need to work together across the whole of the aviation sector, collaborating in order to achieve common goals. Thank you very much.